Each of the gospel writers, the evangelists, has his own style, and each has his own fans and detractors. Now, throughout 2024, most of our gospel readings have come from Mark. For some, Mark is too short and too simplistic. He gives just the facts as he knows them and does not go into much interpretation or detail. There are some later editions that give a bit more information about the resurrection, but the original Mark begins with John baptizing in the Jordan, and a paragraph later, Jesus appears as a fully grown man. And Mark originally ended with an empty tomb. As we shall see over the next year, Luke filled in a lot of the gaps Mark left with a Gentile and cosmopolitan audience in mind. Matthew similarly took Mark and reworked it to fill in gaps and have a more fleshed out storyline. In Luke, we get the shepherds, and in Matthew, the Magi. But as we read this morning, in John, we get something completely different. Matthew and Luke talk about the Messiah. John starts with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John is not concerned with the human reaction or even Jesus' human family or what Jesus means in terms of centuries of Jewish prophecy. For John, what the incarnation means, what Christmas means, is that God was so in love with humanity that God, the one God who is, was, and will ever be, became human. And somewhat more subtly, at least for John, in Jesus, creation began anew. Using the first words of Genesis, John very deliberately interprets Jesus in the context of them. Mark reports, Luke and Matthew storytell, but John theologizes. And John theologizes for a community who saw the world around them fall apart. The empire itself had been on the verge of collapse as 4 emperors took the throne in a single year. The general who seized power and had become emperor and father to a dynasty was the same one who had laid siege to Jerusalem. Under that general's son, the temple in Jerusalem, God's very house, had literally come crashing down as the Roman armies burned the wood and bashed the stones. Jews who had come to follow the way of Jesus were ostracized by their communities. Jews of all stripes had become the convenient scapegoats for all the calamities of the Roman Empire. And then Mount Vesuvius erupted. And then a pandemic struck the Near East from Egypt to Syria. It seemed like not just the political world, but the natural world was descending into chaos and calamity. The world, as it had been, was coming to an end. And John's community was likely one that had gone into hiding to protect itself from this. But into this fear, despair, and anxiety, John wrote of hope. God had not forgotten them. God had not abandoned them. God had not disappeared. God loved them. God was with them. And God had come into the world to be with them. As many of us face fear, despair, and anxiety as we continue to recover from a pandemic and take stock of all that we have lost, as we see a world at war and experience storms like we have never seen before, these words of John are a reminder to us as well. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it.